All right, welcome everyone to a new episode of In the Driver's Seats together with Steven Kohnke, and my name is Simon Sweet. We host this weekly podcast, which is all about helping business owners make the approach of selling their business and building a valuable business a lot more accessible. And our goal with every week is to give business owners new insights, some tactical steps they can take to improve the value of the company. We are driven by a couple statistics that really inspired us at the beginning of the year to say, we got to bring this conversation more front and center. And I'll let Steven introduce what those statistics are.
Yeah, absolutely. These are statistics that have been around for a while, and it's part of the reason why Denver Business Coach exists, and the reason why we decided to do this podcast is to bring the conversation to the story, try to inform as many people as we can, and that's 3 out of 4 businesses that go to sell do not sell. It doesn't include the ones that decide to shut down. Coupled with that stat, which is the crazy one, is 70 to 80% of a business owner's wealth is their business, is tied up in that. And when you say you have a 75% chance of not realizing that cash value, it's pretty crazy. 80% of your cash net worth. So that's what we're here to bring the conversation to business owners, helping them understand how to grow their business with value in mind. De-risking their business is a big part of what we do. So,
yeah, I was just giving a short presentation to some business owners last week, and one of the key takeaways are, like, unless you start engaging in this conversation, the stats are really, the odds are stacked against you, right?
Yeah.
And just hearing it or seeing it on a graph, it's just very impactful. So let's talk a little bit about today's conversation is really focused around one aspect of the business valuation that's maybe a little nebulous to business owners. Like, how do you value a business? And we know, one multiple, we've talked about this before in different episodes of the business valuation, is pretty clear. Depending on the size of your company, it is your EBITDA, or it is expressed as a seller discretionary earnings, and then it is multiplied by a factor, which is a multiple. It's called the multiple, and that can range anywhere from, I guess, 1x on or even less than that, to some companies in the 2 digits. And so we call that, sometimes, I think when we prepared for this conversation, Stevens, you said that's like the intangible, right? Like, do you want to explain a little bit of how does this multiple, I had the line up and then I lost it. So for a lot of business owners, that multiple is kind of like a question mark, like, how do we actually get to it? And so today we want to talk a little bit about what is a way to access it? How do you improve that multiple?
Yeah, I think as a lead up here, the stats out there, and you can look at big companies, valuation sheets and what their shareholder prices are and all that. And if you dig into it, it's seen as 80% of that business's value is tied up in what is referred to by EPI as the intangible capital of the business. So to kind of illustrate that a little bit further, if you evaluate a business at $1 million and they have 200,000 in inventory assets, call it, if you're a plumber, it's your trucks, something that you can sell off that way. If you have 200,000 in assets, that means 800,000 is tied up in how the business is intangibly. And the 4 intangible capitals that we'll talk about are customer capital, social capital, structural capital, and the human capital. And I think we'll zero in on structural capital today and follow up with the other ones later on.
Mhm. So, and again, they're essentially like groupings of, because they're intangible by default, right? It's almost like more of a lens through which you're looking at the business and what is there outside of just, like you said, the assets of the company.
Mhm.
So if we're looking at structural capital, what falls under that that umbrella essentially?
I think when you think of structural capital, you can think of the inner workings of your business. How are things actually tied together? How are they work together? How effective, how efficient they are. So that you can think of, generally speaking, your systems and processes. You can think of your technology stacks. You can think of, intellectual property even. I think what can also fall under there is and we've talked about in the past how reliant is the business on the owner as well, even though there's some human components to that. But I think having good structural capital allows the business owner to further remove themselves from the operational component of the business, which in turn allows for a more valuable company.
Mhm.
I think what also falls under this category is data management. So how are you tracking? What do your scorecards look like? How are you tracking just not just profit and profit margin, those types of things, but close rates, leads generated, ROI on channels. I've seen some companies get down to how many phone calls are you making or how many meetings do you have per week and how effective those are. So being able to really understand the data side of the operational component of the company as well.
Yeah. I mean, we sometimes we get asked, okay, what size of clients do you work with, right, in
Mhm.
terms of revenue or employees? And if you've done that for a while, that question is kind of somewhat arbitrary because we see, companies that with 6 employees do, in the 8 digits revenue numbers, and then we have companies with 40 employees doing much less. And sometimes it's different industries, of course, but sometimes we really do see differences in terms of if how efficient is a company, or how able is a company to produce revenue with less, right? And therefore having higher profit. And so you have the people, but then it's also like how efficient and effective can these people work within the company outside of, just giving their time, obviously, but the technology aspect, like being able to have, like you're saying, having access to data, therefore making better decisions about whether it's on the sales side or whether it's on the project management side, etc. And you don't see that if you just look at a P&L statement, right, or,
Right.
or a balance sheet. And so that ability to, I guess, utilize your human capital in a certain way more efficiently
Mhm.
is a big aspect. So you mentioned a few things. You meant intellectual property, uh, access to data,
Mhm.
processes.
Mhm.
If you can clean a unit or something faster than someone else can, you can be more profitable.
Mhm.
And what else would fall into structural capital?
I think outside of those, you're with the technology that you're using, it kind of alludes to what you're talking about, the effectiveness and the efficiency. Uh, but I think one that is really overlooked that I think is really important is the training and onboarding component of when you do bring someone on is how effectively, how efficiently can you get them up to speed to perform optimally in their position?
Mm-hmm.
How fast can you teach them? How are you able to do that? Because on the I'm bridging the human side a little bit, but if you have the right people in the right place and they're able to execute a part of the business faster, then the next person that's going to elevate your effectiveness, your efficiency within the business. So I think that's one that's commonly overlooked, and how well is that built up, and should be one of the first ones I think business owners should focus on.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I think a lot of business owners have that idea that if they just create the right circumstances, environments, they can have great retention with employees. And
Mhm.
that's true to some extent, but there's always going to be the situation where you have turnover. And the more entry level your positions are, the more turnover you're by default going to have because people move on, are less
Mhm.
stable in their career, want to move up, etc. So if every time you lose someone, it takes a hit in terms of profitability, or it takes away from needing to allocate a lot of training hours, etc., that is actually a suck um,
Mhm.
on the business, or a drain on the business. And having having that training set up properly, or being able to bring someone on and have them at a high level of capacity or proficiency is huge. And it gives you a lot of freedom too in terms of how you're managing the business and not be held,
Well,
not.
it allows you to scale too.
Yeah.
When you're able to have those in place with the I refer to as playbook, just your how to's for the positions. If you can get your training onboarding really well and get people executing well, you can duplicate that process to a way that is very duplicable. That's how you can scale with systems and processes and people working together in that way.
Mhm. So, as a business owner that is maybe thinking of wanting to be at the point where I have the option to possibly sell at a good price, at a good
Mhm.
valuation, maybe I'm 3 to 5 years out at this point. What are some? How can I measure how well am I doing in these areas? How do I know where I'm standing or where I need to be? Do you
Yeah.
have any tips on that?
So it's looking at think understanding where you are as it relates to the intangibles. We have an assessment that can help us out with that. It's derived from Exit Planning Institute, where we can really critically look at what does, in this way, what does your structural capital look like by running through an interview and a couple questions and just saying, all right, this is um, how you can stack up with other people in your industry, and how you can improve. And again, I think it comes to repeatability of your systems and processes, how easily accessible they are, your technology stacks, your IP, how scalable those systems and processes are. So being able to think about um, how would you remove yourself from the business as a business owner? And do you have those things in place where you feel confident to say, here's how you execute our sales process,
Hmm.
go for it. And
Hmm.
I think that's more of the intuitive way of measuring it and really understanding what it is, what it does look like. But we have
Yeah.
other ways too.
No, I think again it comes back to that transference of um, the owner's um, I don't know, it's almost like his mental way of assessing things that, like you're
Mhm.
saying, like shows up as like a gut. Like an owner has a sense this is going to be a good deal, this is not going to be a good deal, or this is a project we want to take on or not take on. But how do you, if if you can't say I have a gut feeling or I just know,
Yeah.
how would someone else really be able to make that determination? Um, Again, is a good indicator. If you as an owner are not called to make those kind of shots as much anymore, that
Yeah.
means there's enough systems and processes there to bring your perspective and knowledge into have it like into a system or process. Yeah.
Yeah.
um, okay, excellent. So this is kind of structural capital, systems, processes, converting knowledge into something tangible, best practices, are topics to look at as an owner.
Mhm.
And then in the next few weeks, like you said, Stephen, we're going to zoom in on the human capital, the customer capital, and the social capital. And again, that's just a way to kind of organize this intangible and give it some context so that it's accessible. In my mind, it's all about an owner what do I need to work on to drive up value? If you have access to what these conversations are, you can start being more intentional about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Any final closing words from your end?
Document early and often.
Document early and often. Excellent. And keep revising it. Don't just do it once and then find
Right.
it away.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and acknowledge it, make it in a way that people are actually using it. Like so many people are still just writing procedures that get filed away and never referenced. So stay up to date with how information is I guess consumed at this point. All right. Thank
All
you
right.
guys for tuning in for In the Driver's Seat. Steven, again, it was a pleasure talking with you today, and look forward to our next conversation next week.
All right. Talk to you then.
Thank you.
Bye.